Hey, how's it going? This is a game on itch.io I found called My Father's Long Long Legs. And I don't know what this really game is. I don't know if it's a horror game. I don't know if it's like a story, like I'm gonna read you a story game, like, sit down the campfire, my robe is slightly ajar and I'm gonna tell you a story game. I don't know. But it looks interesting. It looks like a horror game. It's also pretty long, like 26 minutes, so, I have that much time to do it. So other than that, let's just get going. So, my family lived on the southern edge of a southern Midwestern industrial city in an old house that didn't sound right. Industrial city in an old house, old enough that its basement still had a dirt floor. It was not yet old enough to openly question a parent's behavior, but certainly old enough to recognize its oddness when my father began digging. I retain only a single clear memory of the time before the situation became alarming, and my father forsook sunlight forever. I'm sitting at the bottom of the wood stairs that led down to our basement. Ahead in the dimness stands my father, up to his waist in the hole. Still, in his dark blue uniform from the factory, skin and fabric blackened by the hot breath of machinery and further smoked now by the damp earth, I watch father with the satisfaction of a child who sees in her parents a well of limitless capability. So I guess her father is like a industrial worker, I guess. Upstairs, my mother called out that dinner was done. My father takes one last shovel of earth, turns it over the side of extravagation. That's not what you say that. And in a single incredible motion, crawls out of the hole simply by pressing the sole of his boot to the lip of the pit and moving his whole body upward, walking right past me, right up the stairs. He was always a tall, angular man, as the remaining pictures of him suggest, and to this day I can clearly conjure the marvelous image of my father's long legs striding over me as he emerged from the hole he was to spend years digging beneath the house. Apart from him, there were three of us, my mother, my brother, and myself. So I can choose between mother, brother, and myself. So let's go to the mother. There are many things I don't understand about my mother. The first found my father attractive. She admitted to me many years later because of how unusual he was. He had come to the Midwestern industrial town and secured a job at the same factory where my mother was working. To a practical man, he read constantly and vigorously in subjects ranging from engine repair to philosophy, a habit instilled in him, he had claimed, by his own parents. This was all my father ever said to his family beyond this. Any further inquiry into the subject caused him to leave the room or bring up the other pressing issue. Mother once theorized that father had run away from home. Whatever his reasons for leaving his family behind, my father did not wait too long before beginning a new one. I was born only a few months after my parents were married. Within a few years, father made enough money that my mother could stay home and watch over me, and not too long ago, my brother. Then one night, when my brother was perhaps only a year old, father came home, pulled a brand new shovel from the back of his pickup truck, and descended into the basement where he began to dig. So this guy really loves digging. At first, he told mother that he was preparing to put down a cement floor, suggesting a prelude to a full or partial renovation of the house. As a child, the movements of adults were still largely mysterious to me, and I do not know the specific circumstances under which mothers realized this motive was untrue. Nor do I know exactly what transpired when father told mother that they must go to the basement to discuss the matter closer to its source. For another, the door shut behind them. My brother and I were left alone in the house. My brother cried most of the night while I lay in my own bed, pillows pressed to my ears. The next day my mother reappeared, quietly preparing our meals, and unlocked himself in her bedroom shortly before father returned home and commenced digging once again. My father, for his part, stopped sleeping in the room with her, instead taking to the basement, a decision made which coincided with the first signs of his terrible metamorphosis. The changes were slow but noticeable. Father began to grow paler, and by the time the factory closed and he could spend the whole day in the basement, he was as white as chalk. Perhaps it was this general evidence of wear, the change in skin tone and his subsequent emancipation, that made him look taller, as if his height increased in proportion to the depth of his project in the basement. Meanwhile, my mother put my brother into preschool and sent me to a latchkey program where she worked to support us. In what seemed a deliberate contrast to my father, she grew somehow darker and smaller. My father dug uninterrupted in the basement for at least a decade, and once I started high school, he did not even leave the basement to join us for dinner. Then my mother left him. Oh, shoot. Father was sufficiently enveloped in his life's task that there was no need to replay the arguments from my childhood. Whatever desire he has, once he had to keep us home with his apparently fallen away, lost in the depths of the pit. On her own, mother seemed to physically decompress, to become less bowed. She spoke more, laughed more. She had friends and lovers. We did not see my father at all after we left. Wow, this is crazy. On the day we left for good, he did not even come out of the basement, though by that point it was questionable how easy he was getting through the doorway, so tall he had grown. It was not until many years later that my brother suggested we pay a return visit to our father's house. Needless to say, my brother and I had different experiences of our early home life. So now I can choose between my brother. My brother was young enough when my father began digging that it seemed to him an indifferent fact of life. It seemed obvious to me that something was wrong with our home. Its wrongness was screened, I thought, by the chilly turnises with which our mother moved through it, returning home from work in the late afternoon, serving meals and retiring to her bedroom. The wrongness was screened, of course, by my father, who, after losing his job at the factory, spent nearly all days in the basement, emerging at irregular intervals to eat and use the toilet. This is saying nothing of the physical changes he underwent as time went on. The wrongness was screened by my own actions. The heavy worry I felt that at any moment the fragile equilibrium of our home would be upset and my brother's friends would witness the terrifying truth of our family situation. A situation I myself could not begin to articulate, but which I felt ashamed that an outsider would. Of course my brother, young as he was, saw nothing wrong with inviting his friends to our home, and even taking them down to the basement to see what he called, after our father's example, I believe, the renovations. Wow, this is my voice. The friends never asked to return to the basement after my brother took them down there. Some of them quietly designed to never return to our house at all. Much to my relief, though my brother was often disappointed. I recall only the one instance when my brother was perhaps 7 when one of his playmates made a scene. I believe my brother's friend came from a religious family, which may have been part of the problem. But that may also be something I recognize only due to my own biases. At any rate, to his cosmology was different from my own, as he at least shared some of his anxieties when he attempted to explain to my brother that our father's project in the basement was deeply unnatural. I emerged from the living room because down the hall I could never hear crying. I knew that my brother had a friend over, and so he was prepared for the worst. The two boys stood outside the door to the basement, which still stood open. My brother looked up as I approached, at a loss as to how to comfort his weeping companion. "You're going to hell," our visitor informed me after I managed to get him to look at me. That's where he's digging to down there," the child said, looking from me to my brother. "He's digging to hell, and you're all going with him." My brother did not invite as many classmates over after the day, and I don't believe he ever invited any of them down to the renovations ever again. "Are we really going to hell?" he asked me one night, lying beside me in bed after a nightmare sent him to the floor. I told him I did not know. "But is that what Dad is digging to?" he asked. I told him There was no such place. Then why is Dad digging? In the earlier days, when I sat on the stairs and watched him work, my father had given me dozens of flippant reasons for his own project, seeking dinosaur bones. Expanding the basement for a spare bedroom or a recreational space. Looking for buried treasure. Hoping to strike oil. Suspecting a natural hot spring flowed beneath our house. All of these excuses had lost currency by this point, of course, and when asked what he was doing, as my brother told me, his religious visitor had inquired, my father had other things to say. This is not the real world, my father would say, or something along those lines. What we think is real world is just a layer of dirt caked around the true core of the universe. So he thinks this is not a real world. I mean, he did study philosophy, which makes kind of sense, I guess. And what is dirt? Inert matter, dead weight, the remains of those who came and went before us, content only to further press down upon the creation with the waste? There was a time when human beings were giants walking upon a small earth, but now the earth has grown fat and hateful with our soil, while we have grown small. Starting here, I am scraping away his sediment, our coagulated filth, and returning to our original glory. I assemble his manifesto from memory, from various alliterations and variations Father offered us over the years, and certainly it was the sort of heresy that had offended my brother's erstwhile friend. Still, they were not satisfactory answers to us then, and would not be satisfactory for my brother as he huddled, fearing hell, in my bed. But frankly, I had no other answer for him, and let the matter lapse into science. Which is perhaps why, all those years later, he urged me to come with him back to our father's house. Of course, my experience played a part in my eventual decision. A year or so before we left my father was the last time I ventured down into the basement. My brother was with our friends, having reached the age when he finally realized the awkwardness that resulted from bringing visitors to our home, and Mother had locked the door to her room and apparently gone to bed. Father was, of course, laboring in the basement, and I was doing homework in the living room while watching television. There came a knock at the door. The man on the porch was squat, but dressed nearly in a suit, coat, and hat. A pair of very small spectacles was perched on the end of his nose, looking minuscule in comparison to his large round face. "Hello, young lady," he said to me in a labored voice. "Is that your father's home?" "Who are you?" I asked. The man tipped his old-fashioned hat back on his head, smiling with rubbly lips. "You will not have no reason to know me, of course," he said. "But I'm your uncle." "What?" I left the man on the porch, the door locked, while I went to seek my brother's help. Thus, I discovered she was unresponsive, as she often was in those days. This left me with the only option to summon my father from the basement. What? He did not he did not respond when I opened the door and yelled down, though I thought I could hear faintly the sounds of his digging. I looked back to the front door, where I could see through pebble glass the round figure of a man who claimed to be my uncle, and descended the wooden stairs into the basement. The only light, as always, came from a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. My father had learned to operate in these conditions, but for me, the lack of illumination cast the labyrinth below into a mess of confusing and seemingly contradictory paths of damp black earth, and only slighter blacker shadow. Father had only attempted to dig straight down, but as the years went on, he elaborated his original plans, angling outward from the center of the basement at a depth of perhaps 15 feet. From there, he began to hollow out the entirety of the basement with one long, looping path threaded and bent around itself like some monstrous length of viscera, all the while continuing his march downward. I stood onto the bottom both stair that, as I thought of it, still properly belonged to our house. By my feet was a stack of unfamiliar books. They were old, with blank but wrapped brown covers. Next to them was what appeared to be an antique child's rattle, caked with dirt and several rocks chipped into my voice. Excuse me. and several rocks chipped into the various unnatural but vaguely instrumental shapes. I turned to the void and called for my father. No response came, but I grew more certain than I could hear. However, distantly, the sound of father's shovel. I called for him again, this time giving also my purpose for interrupting his work. There's a man at the door, I said. He says he's my uncle. I stood and waited. As I did so, then the sound of digging stopped. My father emerged in a minute or so later, unfolding himself from the narrow bends of his maze, his pale skin covered only by the rags of his clothing and everywhere dusted gray with soil, including, I noted, the corners of his mouth, which seemed stained, particularly throughout and more darkly. Your father, Father Wumber, not quite asking question, he then added, my brother. I nodded. Show him in, he ordered. The squat stranger, my uncle, who I remember smelled of sour milk, seemed elated at his prospects. I led him down to the basement stairs, his agitation going exponentially until he saw my father standing at his full height. It must have been at least 8 or 9 feet. Then I think, at the entrance of his renovations, I knew to take my leave, and as I ascended the stairs, I heard the visitor remark that my father seemed to have done very well for him, all things considered. I never again saw the man who claimed to be my uncle, either that day or any day after. Perhaps, not coincidentally, this is also my last clear memory of my father, and the one that returned to me many years when my brother suggested we return to our father's house. It seemed my brother wanted to put his mind at ease by checking up on our father, who had been left alone for slightly longer than we had lived with him. On the one hand, I appreciate my brother's sentiment, even if I felt it was misplaced. On the other hand, I knew I could not stop him. His feelings toward father had always been more lenient. The only question was, would I go along with him, or let him make the visit on his own? Wow, so this guy is... I think we should go with him. We decided upon a day to visit our childhood home, where we assumed our father still lived, and decided to meet there one afternoon the following week. But there has been somehow become a miscommunication. I was late. I must have been late. The alternative is that, of his own purposes, my brother arrived early to see our father before I did, and I do not wish to compensate why that would be. The town was considerably less industrial than it had been, though the taste of industry still laced our water and ale. The old neighborhood, not the most affluent even in former times, had fallen into further disrepair. The house up and down the block stood rather than me. It seemed empty. The sidewalks buckled around thick protrusions of sticky weeds which reached out into the potholed street, protruding fingers of the overgrown lawn. The only sign of habitation was a single car, my brother's car, parked outside our old home. The doors were locked, the windows walled up. A hand pressed to the hood told me it was not warm, but apart from that, I had no way of guessing how long the vehicle had been there unattended. Ahead, the house awaited. It seemed not much different from the rest of the building, scraped down to gray bones by the elements. The windows were gone, without even shivers of the glass remaining, and the porch had bowed and now held a stagnant pool of rainwater. The front door stood open at an angle, its lowermost hinge having rusted and snapped into two. Stepping carefully on the rotten porch, I slipped inside and found myself in the old living room. My floor was littered with trash and chunks of plaster dropped from the ceiling. The television was gone. Through a loud patch in the shredded wallpaper marked its former location. The couch had collapsed. The couch had collapsed and now seemed to cover with mounds of some sort of mold or fungus. Ahead was a central hallway, and I could see that the door to the basement had been wholly removed. I called out my brother's name and stood for a moment, looking down into the unwilling darkness. Of course the power was out. It was probably disconnected a long time ago. But a flashlight lay on the floor just outside the basement's entrance. My brother's. The flashlight seemed quite new. I flickered it and pointed it into the basement, but it penetrated far enough only to reveal the foot of the stairs. I called out my brother's name again and waited. There was still no response. Assuming the basement was anything like as I had seen it last night, my brother could have easily gotten hurt if he went down without his flashlight. He might have been lying down there just because of the stairs, unconscious. I had to make sure. Flashlight ready? I went into the basement. Whoa, that's cool. What? I reached the bottom, and when my flashlight returned, only a slope heading deeper beneath the house. I knew my father had done quite a bit of work in the decades since we left. I went down. I called my brother. I walked to the left. I walked to the right. I'm gonna call him. Only my own breathing echoed back through those chambers of barren earth. I walked further into the darkness. Let's just walk further. I called for my brother again. I turned right. The musty smell of old earth filled my nostrils. I'm gonna turn right. I was going in circles. How would I even be able to tell? I took a downward slope back to the left. I called my brother. I'm gonna call him again. What the heck? In the distance, a sound of shoveling did not break its rhythm, as if the digger did not know or care I was there. I followed the sound of digging. I walked into the darkness. So that's the dad. I followed the sound of digging. I went left. Where was my brother? Where was my brother? In the distance. Okay. Let's just go to the digging, I guess. I took a deep breath. I followed the sound of digging. I followed the closest turn in the path. Around me, there was nothing but darkness. I followed the sound of digging. I walked further onward. I called for my brother and received no answer. I followed the sound of digging. I passed branch left and right. And the digging. Was I going in circles? How would I be able to tell? I followed the sound of digging. How long have I been down here? I turned right. I followed the sound of digging. What the heck? Hello? Was he humming? I did not find my brother. I did not know who to tell. I did not know what to tell my mother. I did not know where to go from here, what to do. It is true that I gave up my research, but once I saw what lived there, had been living there for all these years, or more precisely, what had grown there, I ran from the basement. Somehow, by my own luck or by some other design, I made it out of the darkness. Do my brother have not? There is a chance, I think, that he may still be alive. My guilt is heavy, do not doubt that, but it is outweighed by the fear I experienced when I came face to face with that terrible result of my father's attempt at renovation of a warted world. I once told my brother there was no such place as hell. I still believe that to be true, but wherever my brother is now, wow. I wonder if he grown to. Whoa, what? Wonder if he grown as tall as our father. My father's long legs. Wow, that was good. The fight, that was pretty good. I like that. I see. I don't know if that was like a whole thing. I mean, it was pretty deep. Like losing a brother to your father. Like imagine if I just didn't go. Like if I just didn't go to go with him. I just like stayed, and he went there by himself. Like what if I didn't do that? But yeah, that was pretty cool. My voice hurts. Wow, it's kind of hard to like explain that, but I'm gonna just leave that there. That was pretty cool. I like that one. Good job to these people right here. And Michael, nice story, man. All right. Yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. I mean, thanks for listening, actually.